Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we have with us Naina Kidwai, President of Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce Industry, in fact the first woman President of FICCI, which has a huge history going back to our independence time. Welcome to our show, Naina. I'll be speaking to you mainly as President of FICCI today, although you are Country Director for HSBC. You've been a banker all your life, but for this show, I'd just like to first ask you, how does it feel to be the first woman president of this association?
Well, it's clearly humbling. It's an experience which I've been looking forward to because you work quite hard to get here. But at the end of the day, it's also a very sad social comment that it's taken 85 years for India's apex leading chamber of commerce to get a woman head.
Yeah.
But I'm by no means going to be the last.
Yeah, sure.
And we have now
it's a good start.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've also brought in our vice president. So 2 years from now, all things going as per plan, we should have yet another woman president.
Sure. And FICCI, in a sense, Naina, it's an interesting organization because it worked with people like Gandhi, Nehru, some of our industrialists. At that time, they really sort of collaborated, as it were, with our leaders during the independence movement, and also dealt with the British in their own very subtle way, and kept the Indian cause also alive. So a lot of history, right?
Yes, and in fact, it is that history itself that makes it very humbling, because there are photographs in corners of this very same FICCI building where you see some of that engagement of Pandit Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi with what was industry then. And industry was built, after all, from that period, from being very extractive, geared towards Western markets, to being what we are today, which is our strength, which is a domestic consumption-led story and an industry that feeds off that domestic consumption. So we've come a long way. I think it's interesting that you raise that parallel, because the nature of engagement today that we need between government, industry, and I would add civil society.
And it was
it was probably the same issues then, but issues today which are going to require us to have a collective agenda, because we have to work off the same platform.
This is what, Naina, I was coming to this. For instance, the same association, the same industry leaders, I remember in the 1940s, collaborated with Nehru. And if you remember the Bombay plan, which Nehru put in place, where these very industry leaders went to Nehru and said, India needs a lot of government investment those days, since private capital was not available. So that's how the whole command system, the public sector started. And then the understanding was that private industry would kick in once some of these foundations were laid. And so if you see, as you said, that part of history, and then subsequently how India has now come into its own, what sort of role do you perceive FICCI playing, say, today in a globalization framework?
Well, global, yes, and the way India engages with the rest of the world can only go up. After all, today our dependencies are only about 25% of our GDP actually bears off exports and imports. So that can only go up if you look at where other emerging markets are.
I meant in terms of interaction with the present political leadership, civil society that you said. What sort of engagement is needed today?
So the engagement for us is in every aspect critical. I mean, you take something like the land acquisition bill. It's come into place because you have government, industry, but the needs demonstrated through civil society in terms of how you deal with people who own the land and the fairness and transparency of that. And the solutions are unfortunately not necessarily the ideal ones for anyone, but we have to find those solutions.
So sacrifices on everybody's part.
And there's got to be collective engagement on that. So to come together of a common forum, to have that dialogue, to make sure that everybody's listening to everyone and a solution is found, and the solution is not going to be an easy one. But whether it is in terms of the mechanics of land acquisition,
or resources, the way resources are
absolutely, or sustainable growth. That we can't grow forever with energy efficiency not being taken into account, with water being wasted, and with scarce resources not just defined as coal and power, but also our natural resources.
As they say, if society fails, how can business succeed?
Absolutely. And I think if you look at the context, and it's going to come again through soft touch regulation, the CSR agenda, which is defined at least as a guideline as of now, 2% of profits going into CSR activities, is going to make industry have to rethink how it engages with society as well. And that engagement, while it is a guideline, it's an important guideline because it's going to be out there, and there's a bit of name and shame in that you're the company that isn't spending your 2%. And therefore, I think the opportunity for industry to rise to that challenge in a manner which works for it. And that working for it, I think, will need to be defined. And I like a concept which was actually penned by Michael Porter at Harvard Business School called creating shared value.
Shared value,
where the idea would be, and we were talking earlier about the Amul type of story. So it's the ideal concept of shared value, where you have, in that case,
the farmer gets his due, the consumer gets his due, society gets
and if you look at, say, in the same model of dairy, say how a Nestle relates in Moga with its suppliers who are also farmers, which is a win-win for the corporate, it's a win-win for the farmers, all of whom have grown over 30, 40 years with that corporate, are some of the answers.
That brings me to this interesting question, which I keep asking myself. How is it that we've not been able to replicate the Amul experience in several other sectors, vegetables, fruits, where the farmers cooperatives engage, work together, consumer gets his due, farmer. Isn't that at the core of the FDI and retail debate in some sense also?
Yes and no. I think the model that Amul had, which is it's cooperative led, and it's not easy to run cooperatives. India is dotted with the story of cooperatives which got so politicized that they absolute
so
failures.
This has clicked,
So this worked, I suspect, because of the leadership and the sheer scale it got to, with the producer groups genuinely being in charge.
And probably also a lot of involvement of women in this whole venture.
100% so. Yes.
We'll take a small break here. Please don't go away and keep watching RSTV. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We were having a conversation with Naina Kidwai, President of FICCI. Ma'am, we were discussing industry political class relations in the context of FICCI at the time of independence. Our big leaders like Nehru, Gandhi had very close interaction with our industry leaders like Singhanias, the Goenkas and the Tatas. Now, how do you view relationship today? I get the sense that over the last at least 2 years, because of various reasons, there has been some lack of communication between industry and the government and the political class. I won't say a breakdown, but certain misunderstandings, especially in connection with policy around allocation of resources, spectrum, coal, what have you. And a lot of debate in Parliament, civil society, charges of corruption, counter charges, government opposition. So all this has created a climate of, if you please, distrust, not just between industry and government, but between various stakeholders. What role do you think can an organization like FICCI play in clearing some of the air in this regard?
I think the answer lies in the way you've put that question itself, in that the need of the hour has to be some kind of collective decision making across these three constituents. And the forums that organizations like FICCI can provide is just that. Because if you look at the way associations like this work, there's a lot of research-led patterns that first emerge. So there would typically be a report prepared by FICCI, sometimes with a knowledge partner, which could be a major consulting firm or someone who's specifically in that space. So that report is an informed report, which then gets put out often through a seminar or an discussion where industry, regulators, civil society get invited and that dialogue happens. Now, the ideal dialogue is where everybody is heard and you get that forum provided through that event. If it's a well-managed event, it can be very thoughtful.
This could be on land acquisition bill, or it could be on anything.
It could be on telecom policy, it could be on microfinance. In fact, it's been on all of these subjects. It's been on CSR. And the result of that dialogue informs yet another paper. So the paper is transparent because it's available to all. It's available to government, it's available on the website, it's available to industry. It will capture also sometimes what is not necessarily a collective view, because there would be disparate views, and it's important to table those, that there isn't complete agreement. To the extent that
you mean disparate views within the associations, business associations, or among the industry captains?
For that specific industry too, there can be shades of views. So if you don't come to a conclusion, ideally you want to come to a view, but you don't always come to that. But you can also state where the areas of disagreement are in the spirit of transparency. And it becomes important then for that dialogue to happen off that, so that the policy that happens at a government level and the regulation is informed. Industry itself has to recognize what those concerns and constraints are, and civil society, which is, I think, an emerging and important player in the space, also has to work hard to inform itself. But clearly, industry also has to take those views on board. And I think it is that dialogue which is critical. It may make it a much slower process getting to the right answer. And sometimes we will have to force the answer, but we cannot ignore any of these constituents, as we have seen. So whether you look at the areas around land acquisition, of course, are the obvious ones, or the way the CSR policy begins to shape up, or the way Aadhaar rolls out, or the way we look to get GST onto the agenda, which is one of the things, say, FICCI is really working at. There, you cannot work just with central government. You have to work with the state government, you have to work across every political party to address the issues, because at the end of the day, GST is good for industry, it's good for India. So to bring everyone onto that same platform becomes important, and you can only do it through engaging with all the players.
Like just make one small intervention here. There is a feeling which I get when I speak to the political class, may or may not be entirely true, which is that even civil society leaders say this. In the last 3-4 years, somehow industry captains have differed more than they have concurred.
Amongst themselves.
And sometimes bitterly differed, especially when it came to policy on alienation of resources, allocation of resources. Like you can take spectrum, you can take coal, and they've never really built a consensus first among themselves. That's why you have instances of many big industry representatives fighting cases against each other in courts. It's very visible in telecom and coal, particular resources. Now, why is it that the industry is so divided within itself? At least I have not seen industry so divided in many years. In the first 10 years after reforms, they used to move together. This happened in the last 6-7 years.
I think this is in many ways an outcome of competition, and competition is good. I mean, the same telecom sector, competition is what drove prices down.
Then it became a bit unhealthy.
And, well, unhealthy or not, in fact, the whole issue of spectrum was, yes, competitive with each other, which they certainly are, but there was also because of the way the policy was being set on the CDMA versus the way the licenses had been given. So if, in hindsight, I think maybe the way the licensing regime had rolled out created the difference. And then you were trying to bring everyone onto one platform. And the party that you were maybe favoring looked like they were being favored by the other that felt that they were not getting a fair deal. So some of it has to do with the way the regulatory environment evolved.
Of course, regulatory environment, government has been at fault. There's no doubt. But then in telecom, you would agree that that even in the late 90s, when the telecom policy rolled out and revenue share was given to.
And we did it by states.
Yeah.
Do you remember how many?
Yeah.
What was it? 40, 50 different awards were given.
Yeah, I know. Even then, there was a lot of companies went to court. So things have been in the court all the time.
Yeah.
The companies disputing what was given to other companies, or disputing what the way government gave.
The main problem that happened was people sat on the licenses.
People sat on the license. Yeah.
Remember, it didn't get rolled out. It was through a process of enabled consolidation that we've come to having a few strong players.
Yeah.
And the sad thing is, the same sector 2 years ago were being actually talked of as the poster boys of India and growth.
In fact, the world has not seen telecom subscription growth such as this.
And it is
at any time.
And let us celebrate its success as well.
Sure.
At the end of the day, we have built a telecom sector which is material, which serves the poor man as much as it serves the rich. And at the end of the day, enables a connectivity which our landline policy has never permitted. So,
the outcome has been overall outcome has been very good.
I agree. Absolutely.
We'll take a small break here, and please don't go away and keep watching Rajya television. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are talking to President of FICCI, Naina Kidwai. Ma'am, you're right in saying that the telecom story is net has been a very good one. Now, what are the learnings from this whole experience in terms of government-business relations? Now, how do you think, how would FICCI imagine engagement with the government and civil society for allocation of resources in future?
Yeah. Well, actually, we were asked to comment on the Supreme Court judgment, and we were one of those that responded. And our view was that while we agree auction is a good way because it's transparent, we don't believe it's the only way. Because why? Because there's a danger that in going just to the highest bidder, you end up putting prices up of what you may look to as an essential supply. So that balance ultimately has to come through a strong regulator. And I think what we need in the country are strong, good regulators. We need this in every space. Those that by definition, the regulator has to be independent of government. It has to be a body which oversees the regulated in a manner that is fair and representative as well.
For that, the bureaucracy needs to be selfless enough to look at the larger good and actually allow strong regulators to come up, right?
Well, a lot of strong regulator is also around the regulation for that regulator. So you get a strong regulator in SEBI and RBI because the acts which actually rule enable that regulator to operate in a fashion which is good for that industry. So the structure of that regulator and what teeth you give it, how you staff it, and who leads it are very important. And I think what we do need more of is strong regulators, both the regulation and the regulators across industries, whether you talk of hydrocarbons, oil, natural resources, coal, which need to
now we're talking about
see
a
the light
regulator
of
for the real estate sector, which
as
is
well,
very critical.
As well, absolutely. And some of that will also happen through self-regulation. If you have a strong, I remember when SEBI was first set up, and G.V. Ramakrishna was the SEBI chairman then, and he called 5 of us big investment bankers at the time in and said, if you guys don't get your act together and set up your own self-regulatory organization, I'm going to regulate you in a way that you're not going to like. And he had us at the table, talking with him as to what needed to be done, and we created the structures for the next generation.
So you need
to
this
give
kind of a dialogue with other regulators too.
And the sense of your own self-preservation, that if you don't get it right for yourselves, that you don't behave properly for yourselves, you're going to get regulated to the point that you're going to be beaten black and blue.
So it's as you said, it's a question of collective survival instinct. You do things in a way that everybody survives and does well.
And I think it's not impossible to arrive at that. I think we need to create those platform solutions. I think people are in a mindset, because it's not that government has all the answers today. It's not like the political class has the answers, or the bureaucracy, or industry, or civil society. We are all thinking in pockets which we absolutely need to converge.
Does have a view, Naina, on how politics needs to change fundamentally, or the way politics is done in this country needs to change to enable exactly what you just said, a very conducive environment where all stakeholders come together and think of the larger good. For instance, one issue which has kept coming up in various debates is whether funding of election should be radically altered, and whether maybe state funding, you know, maybe businesses can participate in, maybe some taxes could be, special tax could be paid so that
or just transparent,
or funding is made transparent,
exactly the way it is in the US. You disclose what you
disclose what each political party gets from businesses, and it's once in 5 years rather than, you know, on an issue to issue basis, which leads to a whole lot of now, do you think that's a solution? Have you thought about this on behalf of FICCI? Or
we've not really thought about this in a significant way, except to say that it should be transparent. There's no doubt about that, that we do need to have above board ways of enabling this process of elections to go ahead, because at the end of the day we want corruption to go out of the system, and this is certainly one of the reasons why it persists. So it is going to be important to resolve this, because the way the democratic process works is it requires elections, and yes, it's good that the election process itself be curtailed so there's no wasteful expenditure, but we do have to be able to provide the platforms and the voice for those that have to stand for elections.
So this is being seen as something very fundamental.
It is very fundamental.
And you know, one calculation which I've done shows that if you charge just 1% of GDP, is about $20 billion. For a period of 5 years, you have 1 lakh crore for election funding. And 1% of GDP over 5 years is not much. It's 0.2% every year. Maybe some budgetary provision so that state could collect this money and then allocate it to political parties. Do you think these kind of out of the box, I mean, not exactly out of the box, these kind of solutions
I think we have to find these solutions, because otherwise we are doomed to disaster. Because in this day and age, to still talk about a parallel economy on the scale as we have in India is actually something which I find unacceptable. I understand it was there when I was growing up, because tax rates were inordinately high, and you know, if you had ridiculous wealth tax rules and inheritance rules where nobody ever wanted to disclose their wealth, 97% tax rates, fine. Today, the tax rates are very bearable. They are at levels which globally are not low, but not inordinately high. So why is it that we cannot get people to pay their taxes? The counter to it also, to answer some of the question of how that engagement could happen, is you take GST, an important tax which across the board...
It attacks black money,
yeah, it absolutely, because it just makes it easier to collect. We all believe it will add 1.5 to 2% to the GDP of the country. So it's one solution to taking us straight back from under 6% to 8%.
It will bring real estate sector into the indirect tax fold.
It makes administration easier. The pity of it is that today, because of the political structure of the economy, we are not able to see this through. The nation needs it, industry needs it. Of this we have no doubt.
On GST, there seems to be a bipartisan kind of support, isn't it? So far, well, BJP is also saying that they would support it.
I think some of the engagement we're having is beginning to bear fruit, because we are engaging across political parties, across states, and at the end of the day, it's good for everyone.
This is only reform where the left is on board, in the sense they led it earlier. Asim Das Gupta. The BJP is on board because Yashwant Sinha was the he started VAT.
Which is why one's puzzled that we're still struggling at this day and age when we need that money, where India's fiscal deficit is where it is. And this has got to be the year that GST comes through. And I think that is the kind of engagement where, for industry, is not going to government alone. It is going to every party and every state to explain why we believe it is the right answer.
So you think that GST is something that FICCI would be very high on FICCI's agenda in the next 2-3 months?
Absolutely, it is. It is absolutely, because it is absolutely something that we need to see through for the good of the country and for the good of every consumer, because it's transparent then in terms of what tax you're paying instead of being hit by multiple taxes and service taxes and entertainment taxes. You should just have the one tax.
One tax, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, let's hope this fructifies. Thank you very much, Naina, for talking to us. And once again, congratulations for becoming the first woman president of FICCI. That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. We'll come back with another one soon. Thanks for watching.